Yeah, now we are live. Hi, my name is Alex Live, and I welcome you to the Rebel Labs interview with the virtual Jack speaker. Rebel Labs is a content portal run by Zero Turnaround, and you can always find fresh technical content there. Virtual Jack is naturally the best Java user group in the world because it's online only, so we have access to the best speakers from this universe. And this session was no exception. Today we had Kito Mann, who is a principal consultant at Virtual Incorporated, specializing in enterprise application architectures, in training and mentoring Java developers about JSF, HTML5, web components, portlets, liferay, a bunch of Java EE technologies, basically anything that has to do with web applications. Kito is the man. He's also editor-in-chief of the JSF Central and a co-host of Enterprise Java Newcast. So please do check those resources out. And you can find Kito on Twitter. He goes by @Kito99, and you can easily socialize with him and ask anything about Java ecosystem, Java community process. He was on expert groups for a bunch of projects. So be sure to welcome him and say hi to him. So Kito, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It was your first virtual Jack session.
Yes.
It went almost without hiccups. You once dropped the connection,
Yes.
which is totally not your fault. Was everything up to the expectations? Did you have fun talking virtually to a bunch of people?
Oh yeah, it worked out just fine. Yeah, it's funny because I just happened to have done the same presentation yesterday for the Java users group. It just happened, the timing worked out to be within 2 days. I have no idea why. But it's funny because when you do a virtual one, you don't have to worry about projecting and stuff. You know that they can hear you. Like, in that particular room, there was a little bit of an echo, and I was wondering how I was sounding in the way back and things like that. So the virtual jug has that going for it. The flip side, though, is that you can't see. There's always to deal with virtual training too. It's hard to see how people are reacting. It's hard to get no, I didn't have the IRC channel open. Maybe I should have done that. That's a good idea. But I was afraid I'd get distracted. So.
Yeah, it tends to happen, especially when there are controversial topics in the RC. No, you did brilliantly. The pace was, I think the pace was very well chosen. So
good.
It wasn't boring, and you didn't jump through topics too fast to understand. So I really enjoyed this. So let's go into blitz questions that we ask every speaker before we dive into the questions about the session. So what do you think? Is computer science a real science?
That's an interesting question.
You don't have to explain yourselves on those blitz questions. So if you just say one kind of answer for that, that would be totally acceptable. Of course, if you want to elaborate.
It's a mix of science, art, and social engineering.
Social engineering, that's great. Do you like static or dynamic typing more?
I like static typing more.
This is an easy one. What is your favorite IDE?
IntelliJ.
That's a great choice. What is your favorite JVM language?
That's a good question. Well, I guess I would say Java, but that's only because I haven't had enough time to work with other ones. Not because I like Scala. If I were going to start working with another language a lot, I probably would use Scala. But I've heard things about Scala which may annoy me. But I think overall I might like that better. But I haven't really used any others so much to have an opinion. I mean, I've used Groovy a lot, but it's not statically typed, so.
Yeah, it's great. A conflict of interest there.
Right, exactly.
Well, great. Scala is a great language, but you would be surprised, but a lot of people answer Java or Java 8 as the favorite JVM language.
Yes, I will qualify that Java 8 is nice. Like, it's annoying now when I have to work on projects where I can't use it. I'm like, oh, I can't.
That's true. So. That's true. What is your favorite open source project?
Hmm. Favorite open source project?
Well, one of the favorites. Just
Well, this probably isn't too much of a surprise, but I like MyFaces. It's probably not the most popular one, but and the reason I was around when it started, so I've seen it grow over the years, and I've seen it go through that sort of curve. And MyFaces, if you don't know, is the Apache implementation of Java Server Faces. I've seen it grow from that, growth curve of getting really popular to just being sort of a stable product. Um, and I still prefer it on, any project where I'm using JSF. Probably another one that's really high up there would be Prime Faces. I do a lot of Prime Faces work. Prime Faces is the JSF component suite. And I think both of them are really good examples of how amazing open source can be. And MyFaces is an example of one that has no particular, corporate entity. I mean, there is a company that does sponsor some development, but it's not like some huge product some vendor is pushing. And PrimeFace is an example of how you can, take an open source project and build a nice company out of it. So I think they're both nice.
Yeah, those are great choices. Well, those are your favorites as well. So it's your call. What do you think is the worst thing a programmer can do? What is a really bad habit to have as a software developer?
Writing bad code. And I mean, I've done a lot of code reviews over my career, and I've seen a lot of bad code. I mean, if I were to sort of think of some very specific bad habits, undocumented APIs are annoying.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, things, extremely long methods that are like, thousands of lines. Those are bad. There's just lots of things. I don't know if I have a specific. Yeah.
Mixing tags and spaces.
Oh God, yeah, that's really annoying.
That
And one of the things, and this is certainly not the worst thing someone can do, but a lot of developers don't understand how to write documentation either. Not necessarily for the application, but for their own code. Yeah, if you write some awesome code and don't put a word of documentation in it, it's not good. So.
That's true.
If you document everything, that's annoying too. So there's a
There's a fine balance.
Yes, exactly.
Fine balance. That's great. Okay, so let's go into a couple of longer questions about your session. So you talked to us and you presented the HTML5 web components, Polymer, and Java EE MVC framework, right? And let's go from the back end. So there is the Java EE MVC framework, which is a standard that is planned to go out with Java EE 8, right? And that is planned to be ready somewhere in the future. If I'm not mistaken, it's around like 2017.
Yeah, so the first half of next year is the current due date for Java 8, for Java EE 8, excuse me. That's the whole platform.
Coming from the backend perspective, do you think we will actually need an MVC framework that much in 2017, or the adoption will linger future 2018? Maybe creating web applications will be a solved problem by then.
Oh God, no! It'll never be a solved problem. Because even when I look at all the different the HTML specs are just there's so many of them. It's like amazing. I mean, the browser really is becoming a platform, right? But there's still holes in everything. It's like we're getting to the point where at least we're filling in a lot of the holes, but then they've got to mature more. So even when I look at the web component specs, I can sort of see what the next couple versions should look like. There's all these cool things like service worker popping up. I'm sure there'll be things that need to be fixed in that. So it's still going to take a while. And the reality is, it's just good to have enough tools in your wheelhouse, right? So, there may be some situations where, just having some ability to do some MVC functionality is handy to have. And one of the things that I think is in my example application, it's just a to-do app, and it actually does single page stuff and part of it uses MVC. Now, I don't know, if I were building that application from scratch, I might just do it all single page because it's a to-do app. It's not very complicated. But in a larger enterprise application, you may have different parts that are single page and do REST stuff, and you might want to do some stuff that's more typical page navigation, and so just being able to mix and match those things, I think is handy. Now, do I think there's going to be some huge millions of users using MVC when it comes out in 2017? No. But I think it's a useful thing to have as part of the tool chest that is Java EE.
No, that's definitely, basically Java EE being the standard, the specification. It's always good to have standards. That's why we invest so much time into that.
Right.
Do you think that it's not the upcoming, but the current hype and involvement with this microservices architecture ways of structuring your applications, will that be more beneficial for MVC framework, or do you think with us making smaller applications and trying to connect everything through APIs will reduce the need for the proper MVC framework as Java EE MVC?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, hold on one second. My battery looks like it's about to die. I'll be right back. Sorry.
No worries.
This explains why my computer was trying to go to sleep a minute ago. Okay. Sorry. So, will microservices? I don't really, I
maybe
think
they are orthogonal.
Yeah, I kind of think they are. I mean, there's nothing to talk a web app, nothing to stop any particular application from talking to a microservice. So, if for some reason you chose to put more stuff on a server, then you can still talk to a microservice to get the data that you need to manipulate. I'm not really, it just depends on where you want your network calls to come from. Sort of, you want them all to come from each individual device, or do you want some of them to come from another web application that is aggregating stuff and shipping them out in some way?
Yeah, well, my idea was that as long as we minimize our services into just a couple of, say, classes, a couple of functional units, right? The smaller the application that we want to write, the less the need we have for the framework. Maybe we can just get it done with just a bunch of libraries that we do wire ourselves. But,
so you're saying, if you're not talking about the UI stuff, the MVC is not really relevant, right? So then you're just talking about whatever you're using to expose your API, right?
Yeah, in a sense, for the UI, it definitely doesn't matter if there is a microservice or
no.
layer.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you might be using JAX-RS for your microservice API, but you don't have to use MVC or anything for that. So.
Okay, so we naturally kind of like move towards the UI and the front end. And basically, so we talked about HTML5, and HTML5 is the standard and a collection of JavaScript APIs and a bunch of new HTML constructs, right? So obviously, in the UI, everything will be written in using JavaScript mostly, as you showed the validation of some forms. Do you think the server-side JavaScript engines like Nasborn will be useful, or will that be? Is that like a very misguided effort right now?
That's an interesting question. Well, just before I answer that, I did want to just mention, since I didn't say it in this particular interview, that Java EE MVC is not replacing JSF as part of Java EE. So if you're using JSF and you want to continue using it, you can still use it. We're still coming out with JSF 2.3 and Java EE8. They're just very different ways of doing things. So just wanted to point that out. In answer to your question, I mean, to me, there's two things with server-side JavaScript, at least two. One is Node, right? And Node has a very specific way of doing things and a very specific feature set, which to me is not just JavaScript specific. It's just that Node was the first one to really popularize this sort of async style of doing things. So there's that, right? And then there's the language itself, right? So using server-side JavaScript does give you the opportunity, if you're writing your front end in JavaScript, to use the same language on both sides, which can be a benefit, especially depending on the skill set of your developers and how, the team that you have and everything. It also can be a detriment if you aren't a big JavaScript fan, or if you've got a heavy back-end infrastructure of Java or something, in which case Nashorn makes more sense. But if you don't care about having the same language on the front end and the back end, or let's say you're using some fancy transpiler or something to write the same language on both levels, then the question is, do you need the features that something like Node has, sort of the async way of doing things? And then if that's what you need, then the question is, do you pick an alternative like Vertex or something that does it on top of the JVM, or do you want to go pure Node? Or some other way to do some sort of very quick response microservice type stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question, but sort of my thoughts on it.
Well, it's an open question, so yeah, it does answer that. So at least you certainly don't think that it's a misguided effort. In certain cases, you can reuse parts of JavaScript, both server side.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard there's been a lot of success stories with Node. I just personally, I think if I were writing a very large application, I would want a different language than JavaScript. So even for front-end development, if I were going on a brand new, really large project, even on one project I'm on now, I'm more interested in something like TypeScript. That gives me a better language to work with. Although JavaScript has a lot of great features, it just has all those rough edges. So.
It has the bad parts as well.
Yes.
As they say. Okay, so going more into the web development and JavaScript ecosystem. So you talked about Polymer, which is a framework to create HTML elements for your application, right? It's web components, and you can just drop them into your application and use them. And it's powered by Google, right?
Yeah, it's sponsored by Google, yeah.
Yeah, and it's sponsored by Google, and you said that it's production ready, but at the same time, during the session, you mentioned a couple of times that maybe in the JavaScript world, the lifespan of technologies and frameworks is not that long. And I've recently read a great blog post about the sad state of web development, where the author was kind of really saddened by the fact that the front-end development became so convoluted, and it changed, the technology changes so fast. And that is one of the reasons for the Java MVC standard, because, well, that will ensure the longevity of the technological choices that we make. So do you think Polymer is here to stay, or will it be kind of like Angular, when in the middle of the kind of adoption curve, Google changed the direction with it, and Angular 1 and 2 are, well, completely different Angulars.
Right.
So do you think the things that you showed in the presentation are rock solid and are ready to be, well,
yeah,
there is a couple of questions here, but I think if you can elaborate on those topics.
Okay, so just to step back and clarify, Polymer, as you said, it's like a Google-sponsored open source project. And it's actually, I think they're part of the Chrome team, if I remember correctly. But essentially, it's two things, right? And this is part of the confusion. But number one, it's a library for helping you build web components on top of the standards. Okay, so there's 4 different specifications that make up web components that are all slated to be implemented in browsers. Some of them are already in there. Some of them are planning to be added or still being tweaked a bit. And so you can build a standard web component without Polymer, and it'll work, in newer browsers and in older browsers with a polyfill library called webcomponents.js. Okay, so on top of it, Polymer provides some syntactic sugar and some extra features like data binding, so you can automatically update data inside of components and stuff like that. And then on top of that, they have a whole bunch of custom widgets. So they have paper widgets that do material design, like buttons and input controls and drawers and stuff like that. They're all responsive. They all follow the material design standards. And then they have other ones that wrap Google APIs, and also some sort of core features like Ajax and stuff like that. So they have a whole bunch of widgets as well. So you can either use Polymer for building your own custom widgets, which is what Vaadin has done, and other companies are doing. Prime, actually, Prime Faces is not using Polymer; they're using Xtag. But basically, you can use them just for writing your own widgets. Okay, and then you could just as an application developer use the widget yourself. Okay, and Google has a very, very heavy investment. They say they've had over 300 projects written in Polymer, and they also they've been pretty much one of the main proponents behind web components, and they're also using it for major sites like gaming.youtube.com. So they've got a big investment. Now, they probably have a big investment in Angular 2, I'm guessing. Angular as well, I should say, not just Angular 2. They also have other projects like Ionic, which uses Angular. It's built on top of Angular 2. So Google's a big company, right? So I think in the long term, you can guarantee that web components will be around. The browser vendors are on board. And once something goes in the browser, it pretty much doesn't go away if it's a standard. Except for VRML went away, but now there's WebGL. So pretty much once it's in there, you can guarantee that it'll be there. So then the big question becomes, okay, well, if I wrote a Polymer component, is the Polymer project going to go away, right? And I'm sure the Polymer folks will tell you, of course, it'll not go away. Google will support it forever. And I can't tell you. If I had a crystal ball to tell you what Google's plans will be in a couple of years, I really don't know. But I can say that it's open source, and if you write your own widgets using the Polymer API, it's still a web component, so it'll still work. It's just that if one day they decide they want to create Polymer 2 and it has completely different APIs, then if you want to upgrade your application, you would have to upgrade the application, and it wouldn't be trivial, or it might be trivial. Who knows? So I think the really only saving grace you have is that Google has putting a lot of resources behind it. They have like 2 developer advocates. They have a whole team working on it. They actually had a Polymer conference last year. So they're doing a lot of stuff on it, and they're building stuff with it. And it's open source, so there's some longevity there. But 10 years, who knows? Web components will still be here though.
Yes. So you are very confident in that this is a solid choice of technological stack. So yeah, great. I might myself be inspired me to maybe try it on my net to do that.
Cool.
So thanks a lot. I'm out of questions now. So just I want to thank you for this really nice interview. I had fun and really enjoyed spending this time with you. And thank you for the amazing virtual jam session. So anyone who is listening to us on the podcast, this was Kito Mann, or at Twitter at Kito99. Find him, say thanks to him for the session. And if you're watching video, read the session recap above you. Thanks a lot.
Is that where it is?
The video will be embedded.
Okay.
There will be content on top.
All
so
right.
Thanks a lot. See you, everybody, on the next virtual jug session. Thanks, Kito.
All right, thanks for having me, Oleg.
Bye-bye.
Bye.